I remember the exact sound my body made when it hit the concrete. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't even a gasp. It was the dull crack of ceramic shattering and the soft, humiliating thud of flesh collapsing under its own weight. "Get up, Isabella. Stop this." That was my husband's voice. Sharp. Irritated. Embarrassed. I was lying face down on our driveway, cheek pressed against sun-heated asphalt, the taste of blood and barbecue sauce mixing in my mouth. And I couldn't move my legs. My name is Isabella Moreno. I'm 32 years old. I work as a billing coordinator for a network of veterinary clinics in northern Kentucky. I process invoices. I argue with insurance companies about dental cleanings for golden retrievers. I make spreadsheets behave. I do not fake paralysis for attention. But that's what my husband believed. Or at least, that's what he needed everyone else to believe. The party. It was a Saturday in June. My husband Adrian Keller had turned 35. His mother, Lydia Keller, had been planning the party for 3 days. 3 days. She treated it like a presidential inauguration instead of a backyard barbecue. Blue and silver streamers lined the fence. There were rented folding tables with pressed tablecloths. A custom cake shaped like a football even though Adrian had not touched a football since high school. Lydia didn't care what Adrian liked. She cared what looked impressive. And I was just the daughter-in-law who never quite measured up. The collapse. I was carrying a heavy ceramic platter stacked with smoked brisket from a place on Madison Avenue that charged like they were selling gold. Halfway across the driveway, it happened. No warning. No stumble. No dizziness. My legs simply turned off. Like someone unplugged me. The platter flew out of my hands. The world tilted. Then concrete. Hard. Final. For a second, I thought I'd just tripped. I tried to push myself up. My arms shook. My knees didn't respond. I told my toes to move. Nothing. I tried again. Nothing. The panic didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly. Like cold water rising around my ribs. "Adrian," I whispered. He walked over from the grill. Walked. Not ran. He looked down at me. Not frightened. Annoyed. "Seriously," he muttered. "You're doing this now? I can't feel my legs." He exhaled loudly, glancing toward the backyard where 14 guests were laughing. "Stop. Just stand up." "I can't." His jaw tightened. "Don't make this about you. Here's the part that hurts more than the paralysis. 14 people were at that party. 14. And no one came to help me." One of Adrian's co-workers took a step forward, but Adrian waved him off. "She does this," he said casually. "She gets dramatic." And that was all it took. Months of quiet narrative building. Months of subtle character assassination. Isabella is anxious. Isabella overreacts. Isabella Googles symptoms. Isabella loves attention. Gaslighting works best when done slowly. By the time I was lying on that driveway, they didn't see a woman in medical crisis. They saw a performance. It started with tingling in my feet. Pins and needles. Every night after work. Then came the exhaustion. Not "I need a nap" tired. "I cannot physically lift my arms" tired. I told Adrian. "You sit weird at your desk," he said. Then blurred vision. Then my legs buckling in the shower. Then numbness creeping past my ankles. Each time I mentioned it, Adrian responded the same way. "You're stressed. Drink water. You always assume the worst." Lydia was worse. "Young women don't have stamina anymore." She said that while taking a 15-minute break after carrying grocery bags inside. But I stopped arguing. Because arguing made me emotional. And being emotional proved their point. 4 years, I drank chamomile tea before bed. 5 months ago, It started tasting different. Slightly bitter. Adrian said he'd switched brands because the old one was more expensive. He made it every single night. Never forgot. Not once. I thought it was sweet. I thought it was love. I was still lying there. Grease soaking into my blouse. My hair sticky with sauce. My legs dead weight beneath me. Lydia approached, heels clicking sharply on the pavement. "This is ridiculous," she announced loudly. She always ruins things. I looked at her face. There was no confusion. No concern. Only irritation. And something else. Something colder. Fear. No. Calculation. The music kept playing. Classic rock. The smell of charcoal drifted past me. For 90 seconds, I believed I might die there. Unbelieved. Unhelped. Unseen. Then. Sirens. Someone had called 911. I don't know who. But whoever it was saved my life. The ambulance doors opened. A woman stepped out. Short brown hair. Calm eyes. Confident movements. Her badge read Tanya Eastman. She knelt beside me. "Can you feel this?" she asked, pressing a tool against my foot. "No." She tapped my knee. No reflex. She shined a light in my eyes. She wrote more than usual on her chart. Adrian hovered. "She's been like this for months," he said. "It's anxiety." Tanya didn't look at him. She kept her focus on me. "When did the symptoms start?" 5 months ago. "Any changes in diet?" "The tea," I whispered. It started tasting different. Her pen slowed slightly. She wrote something down. Then she said calmly into her radio. "Requesting police support for interference with patient care." Adrian stiffened. "It's my driveway. And she's my patient," Tanya replied. He stepped back. But not far. Adrian didn't ride with me. He said he needed to manage the guests. Manage the party. Manage appearances. As the ambulance doors closed, Tanya leaned close and said quietly, "You're not crazy." I nearly broke. Because those were the first kind words I'd heard all day. The hospital ceiling was the color of old paper. That's the first thing I remember when the ambulance doors opened and fluorescent lights replaced the sky. I couldn't feel my legs. But I could feel everything else. Fear. Confusion. The quiet cracking sound of my marriage splitting in half. They moved fast at first. Questions. Vitals. Blood draw. MRI ordered. My body felt like a house with the electricity cut off to the lower floor. I could see my legs. I could touch them. But they didn't belong to me. A young ER doctor came in, dark circles under his eyes, name badge slightly crooked. "Ms. Moreno, we're going to run a full neurological workup." "Am I paralyzed?" I asked. "We don't know yet." That word, yet, hung in the air like a threat. He showed up 3 hours later. 3 hours. He didn't rush in. He didn't look shaken. He stood near the foot of my bed like he was waiting for a bus. "What did they say?" he asked flatly. "They don't know yet." He nodded. Looked at his phone. Then, unbelievably, he said, "Mom's really upset about how today turned out." I stared at him. "I can't feel my legs." "You probably pinched a nerve." He sounded irritated. Like my medical emergency was inconvenient scheduling. And something inside me, something small and ignored for years, started whispering, "This is wrong." Around 9 p.m., a nurse came in. She adjusted my then paused. "Do you feel safe at home?" She asked it slowly. Deliberately. I opened my mouth to say yes. But the word felt heavy. Because suddenly I wasn't sure what safe meant. I said yes anyway. Because admitting doubt felt bigger than I could handle that night. The next morning, the doctor returned. This time, he didn't stand. He pulled up a chair. Doctors only sit down when the news is serious. Behind him stood two women. One in scrubs, a patient advocate. One in a navy blazer with a badge clipped to her belt. Detective Clara Nguyen. My pulse quickened. The doctor folded his hands. Your MRI shows progressive demyelination of your peripheral nerves. I blinked. In plain terms, he continued gently, the protective covering around your nerves is deteriorating. Is it multiple sclerosis? I whispered. No. Autoimmune? No. He hesitated. The pattern doesn't match natural neurological disease. Silence. Then, your toxicology screen came back. The room felt smaller. There are elevated levels of methylene chloride in your bloodstream. I had never heard that word before. It's an industrial solvent, he explained. Found in paint strippers, degreasers. I swallowed. How would that get in my blood? The doctor looked at Detective Nguyen. She stepped forward. The levels suggest repeated ingestion in small doses over several months. The word ingestion landed like a brick. Someone, she said calmly, has been poisoning you. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My brain simply stopped. Like it couldn't process information that catastrophic. I replayed the last 5 months in my mind. The tingling. The fatigue. The blurred vision. The tea. Every night. Adrian made it every night. I felt suddenly cold. Detective Nguyen sat down. When did your symptoms start? 5 months ago. Did anything change in your routine around that time? The tea, I said slowly. It tasted different. Who prepared it? My husband. How often? Every night. She nodded. And what does your husband do for work? He's an inventory supervisor at an auto parts distribution warehouse. Her pen paused. Does he have access to industrial chemicals? Yes. The room shifted. Not emotionally. Strategically. This was no longer a medical mystery. It was a crime scene. While I lay there, Detective Nguyen continued. Has your husband taken out any life insurance policies on you recently? The question hit harder than the diagnosis. I don't know. I suddenly remembered the credit card statement I'd found 3 weeks earlier. $7,400 balance. He'd said it was a bank error. He'd never called. I told her. She wrote everything down. By that afternoon, police had obtained a warrant. I learned later what they found. In the garage workshop. Behind old paint cans and bowling trophies. A half-empty container of industrial-grade methylene chloride. Signed out from his workplace inventory records. Over 6 months. Excess amounts. More than his job required. Trust, it turns out, is the best camouflage. The $7,400 credit card wasn't a bank error. It covered premiums for a $350,000 life insurance policy on me. No medical exam required. My signature forged. Policy initiated 7 months ago. Before my symptoms began. Before the tea changed. Before my legs failed. He had planned it. From the beginning. Then came the address. A 380 square foot studio apartment in Florence. Rent paid monthly. ATM withdrawals near it. He had been building an exit. A new life waiting quietly while mine deteriorated. He wasn't just killing me. He was replacing me. The final blow wasn't Adrian. It was Lydia. Detective Nguyen showed me screenshots. She mentioned the tea again. She scheduled a doctor visit. Make sure nothing ruins Saturday. Lydia had known. She had monitored me. Reported on me. Adjusted the timeline. The driveway collapse wasn't an accident to her. It was poor scheduling. My chest felt hollow. Adrian I could categorize greed, cowardice. But Lydia. She had stood over me while I lay paralyzed and accused me of ruining her son's birthday. She knew exactly why I couldn't stand. There was one more thing. Adrian's father had died 12 years ago. 6 months of unexplained neurological decline. Tingling. Fatigue. Motor loss. Cause of death, undetermined. No toxicology. Detective Nguyen didn't accuse Lydia directly. But she didn't need to. Patterns speak loudly. If Lydia had done it before, then Adrian didn't invent this. He inherited it. Like a recipe. Like a family tradition. That night, alone in the hospital room, I stared at my legs. They were beginning to tingle faintly, sensation creeping back. And I realized something terrifying. If I had ignored the bitterness in the tea, if I hadn't collapsed publicly, if no one had called 911, he would have succeeded. Slowly, quietly, convincingly. I would have died labeled fragile, anxious, dramatic. And everyone would have believed him. But someone called 911. Someone believed the scene didn't look right. And a paramedic listened carefully enough to notice. That changed everything. At 5:42 a.m., someone knocked on our front door. It was still dark outside. That deep, heavy silence before sunrise when even the birds haven't decided whether to start singing. Inside the hospital, I was awake. I hadn't slept. Detective Clara Nguyen had called the night before and told me they would be making contact in the morning. Making contact. Such a calm phrase for the destruction of a life. Daniel opened the door in gym shorts and an old faded t-shirt from a bowling tournament. He blinked at the badges. 3 officers. Detective Nguyen. A warrant in hand. For a brief second, he didn't look shocked. He looked resigned. Like a man who had been expecting the knock for weeks. Daniel Rios, Detective Nguyen said evenly, "You are under arrest for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and forgery." He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He didn't say it was a mistake. He said 4 words. "I want a lawyer." That was it. No denial. No confusion. Just procedure. They cuffed him. Neighbors' porch lights flicked on. Someone's curtain moved. The quiet street absorbed the scene without drama. Justice doesn't always explode. Sometimes it just clicks shut. 12 minutes later, officers arrived at Marina's house. Her lawn was perfectly trimmed, as always. American flag hanging neatly by the door. She answered in a silk robe. When she saw the badges, she tried to close the door. An officer blocked it with his foot. She didn't go quietly. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "My son would never." But she stopped mid-sentence. Because she knew. She knew what they knew. She was arrested as an accessory to attempted murder. The respectable widow. The organized party planner. Led away in handcuffs at dawn. Daniel was denied bail. Too much evidence. Flight risk. Premeditation. The forged insurance policy alone ensured that. Marina's bail was set high, $500,000. She couldn't post it. For the first time in decades, she and her son were separated. No coordinating. No strategizing. No whispered instructions. Just 2 separate cells. 2 separate realities. Detective Nguyen visited me again that afternoon. She placed a thick folder on the tray table beside my bed. "Your father-in-law," she said carefully. Daniel's father had died 12 years earlier. Official cause, progressive neurological failure of undetermined origin. 6 months of symptoms. Tingling. Fatigue. Weakness. Loss of motor control. Identical timeline. No toxicology screening had been ordered back then. No suspicion. Just grief. Now, the district attorney authorized a review of the case. Possibly even exhumation. My stomach twisted. If Marina had poisoned her first husband, then Daniel hadn't created something new. He'd learned something old. Within a week, Daniel and Marina had separate attorneys and separate stories. Daniel claimed his mother pressured him, that she suggested it, that she taught him what dosage wouldn't trigger suspicion. Marina claimed ignorance, said she had no idea what was in the tea. The text messages said otherwise. Their alliance fractured instantly under pressure. The bond that had crushed me dissolved the moment survival was at stake. I realized something profound then. Their loyalty to each other had never been love. It was strategy. Meanwhile, my legs tingled constantly, sensation returning like electricity flickering back to life. Painful. Sharp. But alive. The neurologist explained that peripheral nerves regenerate slowly, an inch per month. Some damage might remain permanent. I didn't care. I could feel again. That was enough. 3 weeks after the collapse, I stood for the first time. The hospital hallway stretched in front of me like a marathon. My sister Sophia stood at my side. Slowly, she whispered. 1 step. My left leg trembled. 2 steps. The right followed. 4 steps. I was crying. Not from pain. From power. Because no one was telling me to stand up anymore. I was choosing to. The first hearing was quiet. No dramatic speeches. Just legal language. Attempted first-degree murder. Insurance fraud. Forgery. Accessory. Daniel stood in orange. His eyes flicked toward me once. Just once. There was no apology there. No remorse. Only something cold. Something assessing. As if calculating whether I would testify well. I held his gaze steadily. For the first time in years, I felt taller than him. Even sitting down. My divorce attorney moved quickly. Under state law, a spouse committing a felony against their partner forfeits certain property claims. The house. The joint accounts. The equity. Everything froze, then shifted. Total assets recovered, approximately $188,000. Not life-changing wealth. But mine. Every dollar untainted by his future plans. I sold the house within 2 months. I refused to keep walls that had watched me weaken. Detective Nguyen showed me photos. The studio apartment. Beige walls. Cheap laminate flooring. A single mattress. A folding table. No decorations. No personality. Just an exit strategy. He had been preparing to step into that room after my funeral. I imagined him standing there. Insurance payout deposited. Neighbors offering condolences. And then silence. The thought made my skin crawl. The first 2 weeks after learning the truth were worse than the poisoning. I questioned everything. Every I love you. Every forehead kiss. Every cup of tea. How many times had I thanked him? How many nights had I felt safe? Betrayal isn't loud. It's microscopic. It embeds itself into memories and poisons them retroactively. But something else grew alongside the grief. Clarity. I replayed the driveway scene in my mind. The way he didn't kneel. The way Marina looked irritated instead of afraid. The way 14 people believed his version of me. And I understood something. Gaslighting only works until evidence arrives. Truth is patient. It waits. And when it surfaces, it is merciless. The district attorney formally reopened the investigation into Daniel's father's death. Forensic toxicologists began reviewing medical records. If methylene chloride was found in preserved tissue samples, Marina wouldn't just be an accessory. She'd be a murderer. Generational violence disguised as respectability. The thought chilled me more than my hospital room ever had. One evening, weeks later, I stood alone in my hospital room by the window. I could walk unassisted now. Still shaky. Still numb in places. But upright. The sun was setting. Orange light spilling across the floor. For months, I had felt small. Fragile. Dismissed. But in that moment, I felt something stronger than anger. I felt freedom. Because the people who tried to control my story no longer could. They were behind locked doors. And I was healing. The courtroom felt colder than the hospital room ever had. Not because of the air conditioning. Because truth was about to be spoken out loud. I walked in slowly, my steps steady but careful. My nerves were still healing, but today I refused to look fragile. Daniel sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, thinner than before. His confidence was gone. In its place was something tighter, fear disguised as composure. Marina sat beside her attorney, perfectly dressed as always. Her posture was straight. Her chin lifted slightly. But her eyes were restless. The prosecution began with the evidence. The insurance policy, forged signature. The chemical purchase, traced to Daniel's account. The text messages, Marina advising him to increase gradually and don't rush it. The courtroom grew quiet as screenshots were projected onto the screen. There it was. Black and white. Proof. Daniel's lawyer tried to argue emotional stress. Financial pressure. Marital problems. But attempted murder isn't a misunderstanding. It's a decision. Then came the toxicology expert. He explained how methylene chloride metabolizes in the body, how symptoms mimic neurological disorders, how long-term exposure weakens muscles and impairs breathing. He looked directly at the jury. This was not accidental exposure. This was repeated administration. Repeated. That word echoed in my mind. It meant patience. Planning. Calculation. Then came the bombshell. Daniel's father's medical records. Similar symptoms. Same timeline. No toxicology done at the time. The district attorney announced that preserved tissue samples were now being tested. Marina's composure cracked for the first time. Her fingers tightened around the table edge. Daniel turned toward her sharply, as if realizing something he hadn't allowed himself to question before. The alliance between them was collapsing in real time. When it was my turn to testify, the courtroom felt smaller. I described the tea. The dizziness. The driveway. The humiliation of being called dramatic while my body shut down. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I told it plainly. And sometimes plain truth is the most powerful weapon. Daniel avoided my eyes the entire time. When the prosecutor asked if I believed my husband loved me, I paused. I believe, I said carefully, that he loved what my death would have given him. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. The jury watched him differently after that. Marina's attorney attempted to paint her as an unaware mother. A victim of her son's actions. But the texts contradicted that story. Make sure she finishes it. Don't panic if she feels weak. Stay calm. Those weren't the words of someone ignorant. They were instructions. By the end of the week, the narrative had shifted completely. They weren't a grieving family. They were co-conspirators. And I wasn't dramatic. I was almost dead. When court adjourned that day, I walked outside into bright afternoon light. For the first time since the collapse, I felt something solid beneath me. Not just pavement. Justice. The courtroom was silent the day the verdict was read. You could hear the shuffle of paper. The faint hum of lights. Someone coughing in the back row. Daniel stood stiff beside his lawyer. Marina looked smaller than before, though she still tried to sit tall. The jury filed in. 12 strangers who now knew the darkest details of my marriage. The foreperson stood. On the charge of attempted first-degree murder, We find the defendant, Daniel Rios, guilty. A breath left my lungs that I didn't know I'd been holding for months. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, not in regret, but in defeat. Then came Marina's verdict. Accessory to attempted murder, guilty. Her face drained of color. There was no dramatic outburst. No screaming. Just the quiet collapse of a carefully constructed image. Sentencing followed weeks later. Daniel received 22 years. Marina received 12. As they were led away, Daniel finally looked at me. Not with anger. Not with love. With something like disbelief. As if he still couldn't understand how I survived. Freedom felt strange at first. The house sold quickly. I kept only what I needed: clothes, photographs that belonged to me, a few books. I moved into a small apartment filled with sunlight. No heavy memories. No suspicious tea. Recovery was slow but steady. Physical therapy rebuilt my strength. My legs still tingled some nights, a reminder of what had happened. But I was walking. Living. People in the neighborhood whispered at first. Then the whispers turned into quiet respect. I wasn't the dramatic wife anymore. I was the woman who survived. Therapy helped too. Not because I was weak, but because betrayal leaves invisible scars. I had to relearn trust. Relearn safety. Relearn my own judgment. The hardest part wasn't the poisoning. It was accepting that the man I loved never truly existed. But healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about refusing to let it define your future. And slowly, piece by piece, I began building mine. 6 months after the trial, the forensic report came back. Trace levels of industrial solvents were detected in preserved samples from Daniel's father. Not enough decades ago to raise suspicion. Enough now to raise certainty. The district attorney filed additional charges against Marina. Murder. The courtroom filled again. This time, there was no composure left in her. Evidence showed similar purchasing patterns. Similar symptom progression. Similar manipulation. Daniel refused to testify for her. The loyalty was gone. She had taught him how to poison. He had perfected it. And now both faced the consequences separately. When the verdict came, guilty, there was no shock. Only inevitability. Marina's sentence extended to life. Generational cruelty ended in a prison cell. And I realized something chilling. If I had died, the cycle would have continued. But it stopped with me. 2 years later, I stood in front of a mirror, strong, steady, alive. The woman staring back at me was different. Not softer. Not colder. Stronger. I had gone back to work. Earned a promotion. Built friendships rooted in honesty. I no longer jumped at every unexpected knock. I no longer doubted my instincts. Sometimes, at night, I think about the driveway. About the moment my body gave out. And I feel gratitude. Because that collapse exposed everything. It saved my life. The last time I passed the old neighborhood, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. The house belonged to someone else now. The story belonged to me. They tried to silence me. Instead, they gave me a voice. And this time, if someone knocks before sunrise, I open the door only if I choose to.